Hello, this is Fiona Cuthbertson coming from the pod to record another episode of Off the Cuff. This week we're lucky enough to have Christie Spurling MBE, the first ever winner of the Marcus Rashford Children's Champion in 2021. He's always been a strong advocate for our youth. He is the CEO of N-Gage, a Manchester-based charity that gives young people at risk of educational or social exclusion the opportunities and skills they need to achieve their potential. Having experienced educational exclusion himself, he knows how important it is not to write off young people and has dedicated his life to helping young people stay on the right path. Welcome, Christie.
Afternoon, Fiona.
Thank you very much for coming along today. Firstly, can you tell us a bit about your career and how you ended up committing your time to helping young people at risk of education or social exclusion?
I was excluded from high school, put into a residential unit, struggled with primary school, nursery, just anywhere where I was left due to being adopted. Left without qualifications, didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life. Found my way into youth work just through church. And that was just kind of helping out at holiday clubs. I'm a drummer as well, so getting involved in music and that kind of thing. And then I realised that I had a bit of a skill for working with young people who are a bit disengaged. I was always quite good at noticing people who maybe felt a bit left out. I was always very good at bringing people in and trying to get them to feel included. So I trained to be a youth worker, did a placement at a church, and then from there I ended up going back and worked in a residential unit, which is basically exactly the same unit that I got put in when I got excluded from school. The same sorts of young people. Obviously, it's been a really tough place to work with damaged young people. It was kind of how I started my career.
And you've also been a school governor for the last 3.5 years. So what issues have come across your desk in that role?
Attendance is obviously quite high up on the agenda at the moment. Since the pandemic, a lot of young people and sort of families are disengaging with their education, sort of not attending for various reasons. One of the issues that I'm grappling with is I feel like education is almost like a very square box. People are all different shapes and sizes, and they don't always fit into that box. But I believe every young person has got things that they're good at. That every young person has passions and enthusiasms, things that they can turn into a career. But it feels like it's very academic. And then if you struggle with that for whatever reason, you can feel a bit disenfranchised and like you don't really fit in. As a governor, I have no issue with education. I have no issue with the idea of school, but I do sometimes feel like the way that we educate young people en masse doesn't suit everybody, and that's where you see some of the challenges. I think the other thing, probably funding. It's gone up and down over the years, but it does feel like there's never quite enough money in the pot to do all the things that need to be done.
And if you have a child in school that is feeling upset and disenfranchised, that's usually because, as you say, they have a chaotic childhood outside school. So what do you do in order to try and bring them back on board? What techniques do you use?
Staff will have a caseload of young people that they work with, and it's all one-to-one work. So we go in, might be for an hour or two a week. We'll work with these young people who are struggling for whatever reason. Variety of things, stuff going on outside of school, issues with families, issues a lot of sort of looked after children. We basically just try and give them an hour a week where they can come and see our staff. We listen to them, try and just get alongside them, develop a trusting relationship with them so they can unload about what it is that's worrying them, what it is that's stopping them from accessing their education, and then try and support them through so that they can get back on track. We notice as well, having external staff from an organisation that's trusted going into a school works really well.
And obviously you were awarded an MBE for your work with young people in Manchester. Can you tell us how that made you feel?
If you'd have told me when I was a younger person, sat in a classroom completely disengaged, got an MBE in later life for going into schools and working with young people and working in communities and doing all the things that people told me I couldn't do, I probably would have laughed at you. So yeah, it was an amazing experience for me and my family. Very fond memories of that day. We got the Queen as well, which was amazing. I think it was one of the last ones she did, or second to last one she did.
And if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Not giving up. You know, I had an interesting childhood. I don't think things were particularly easy for me, but I always just try my best. I like troubleshooting, just looking at problems and trying to fix them. So just not giving up and just being a bit stubborn about things and not falling at the first hurdle.
The next question I was going to ask is what the most important lesson is that you've learnt over your career.
Bringing people with you. So I always try and make sure that my team are coming with me where we're going. So making sure that people feel like they're part of what you're doing. You never feel like they're responsible for their own roles. Giving people the skills to do a job, not micromanaging them. Get some of the best work from people when you let them work like that.
Absolutely. And what underrated tools are indispensable for your job?
Sense of humour. And something in your brain or in your back pocket that you can just pull out when someone just goes quiet. That's one of the skills of being a youth worker, I think, isn't it? Being able to get alongside people.
And what's the hardest challenge you've had to overcome in your roles?
Generally, it's when things external happen and you kind of think, for goodness sake, I'm trying to help people here. Why We got online frauded 4 or 5 years ago. £25,000 went out of our bank account and disappeared into a bank account in London. We managed to get it back minus £500. So that was really, really stressful. And then there's an organisation a couple of years ago that were going around pretending to be us and just piggybacking up our good name. Let's get solicitors involved and stuff. And then pandemics come along, don't they?
Talking of things that are out of your control, have you found any barriers to getting your message across?
I wouldn't say it's a barrier, but I think you have to constantly work to keep yourself relevant, get an opportunity to go and speak at things, that kind of stuff. After the award and the MBE, quite a lot of doors open. So it's just kind of constantly trying to work to keep those open without being too sort of pushy with people, I guess.
And with the pandemic, there's been a greater focus on mental health and well-being. So what do you think helps ensure young people have the opportunities they need to achieve their full potential?
One of the biggest challenges has been all the cuts to various services for young people. So youth services, mental health, CAMs, spaces where young people go and speak to people have all been cut to the bone. I think a lot of youth provision now is done by the voluntary sector, and there isn't really much full authority provision. And obviously the money that goes with that has been absolutely sliced. So it's just challenging for young people. Not always obvious where they go when they need help. I think there's a huge amount of pressure on schools to be the be-alls for everyone and look after everything. Not all young people want to go and speak to school about the problems. They might want to speak to someone outside of school. They might want to have other services. So cuts to the services and it not always being obvious where that help is available and how to get signposted to it.
Talking of services, you have 3 programmes in place. There's the Elevate programme to help educate young people on subjects like drugs, racism, citizenship, prison awareness and gangs. The Inspire programme, which promotes positive relationships, and the Beats programme, which is an enterprise challenge. Can you tell us a little bit more about these projects and how they help young people in Manchester?
I'll start with Elevate. So when I set up N-Gage, I looked at some of the things that I felt were missing when I was at school. No one goes into school and talks to you about the consequences of what will happen if you do get excluded, which is why we do what we do now. Basically, it was just a way of going in and talking to people about consequences of their behaviour, getting them to think about the future, and just helping them to be able to have a space to talk about things that were going on in their lives. We're looking at rewriting it because some of the subjects that are on it probably need redoing now. I think there's some new stuff coming up now. Certainly mental health would be on there, stuff around technology that we used to do about drugs and stuff, but now there's a lot of vaping. We are looking at redoing that later on this year. Beats went into a school and there was a load of young people who school had told me were really disengaged and they didn't really know what to do with them. They seemed quite fed up with them. I went into a room and these young people were just rapping and sort of MCing. What I felt was, how can we try and get them to talk about positive things? So all this rapping and MCing stuff was about dragging people out of cars and beating people. So I basically wrote a programme. It was 10 weeks. I got a load of music software on some laptops. They created their own music tracks. Over a period a few weeks, they planned an assembly. They designed some packaging for the CDs as they were back in those days, and then they did an assembly, pitched this album that they'd written, chose a charity, and then set up a stall in the school. And they sold these albums, and we raised £600 or something for selling these albums. And then in the background, we've been getting them to think about young people that were the same age as them in different countries. So with the money that we raised, we bought loads of sports equipment for an orphanage in Africa, and then got them writing letters to each other. And basically, the whole idea is that you've got these disengaged young people who are normally at the front of school because they're being told off, doing something really positive and learning about enterprise, about people from other cultures, about money, about if you do something positive, you get a reward for it. All that. I don't know, local press picked it up. I think I won an award for that back in the city council. And the Inspire thing is one of the girls that used to work with me, she went into the school and they said, we've got a small group of, in this particular case, girls, and they don't really know what a healthy relationship is. They don't really know how to speak to people. They don't know how to behave around boys and that kind of stuff. So this girl wrote this programme, kind of just developed that over the years. So they're the 3 programmes that we run. Generally, someone comes to me with a problem, or I notice a problem and then I go away and I write something to try and tackle it. It's trying not to be too obvious about it, sometimes wrap it up in something so they don't even necessarily even know they're talking about it until the conversations happen quite informally.
So what do you think is a common myth about young people at risk of educational or social exclusion that needs to be dispelled?
A lot of young people that need help, they need help because of something external that's happened to them that's out of their control. So they're almost like victims is maybe a bit of a strong word, but something's going on that's made them the way they are. And it's about trying to unpack that and work through that with them. Could be the way the education system's run. It could be the fact that there's not really many places for them to go these days. I feel like young people have been disproportionately targeted in the cuts as well. A lot of the things that have disappeared for young people and, sure start centres and youth centres and support, mental health, all that kind of thing. But then nobody's really tried to help them.
was going to ask whether or not you think the ministry and the department engage enough with those on the coalface to ensure that the plans they make actually work.
You've got central government who've got their plans and their view of the way things are. Then you've got people on the ground like me, and I don't really feel like we really talk to each other very much. I think there's a real disconnect between people on the ground like me and the policymakers in Westminster.
So if you were Secretary of State for Education, what would be the first thing you would change?
I think I'd go back to more of a vocational educational offer. So I worked in a school a few years ago and they had a vocational centre. They basically built a little bricklaying, a garage and hair and beauty in a little space around the back of school. I mean, they used to take really, really disengaged young people who struggled with mainstream education and basically showed them how to do car mechanics and stuff, and then they went off and got apprenticeships. They could see the benefit of education because they were getting skills that they needed to get a job. Maths, English and science are understandably a huge focus, but I think the creative, music, the sport, computers, that kind of stuff, it's in danger of getting a little bit squashed out. If you're a really, really talented singer, it feels like in the school you're not really pushed in that anymore. All you ever hear them talking about really in my world is maths, English and science.
What other issues do you feel are facing young people at the moment that don't get the coverage that they should?
Investment in youth provision, because I think one of the things that's happened is that the voluntary sector has stepped up. Certainly in Manchester, most of the youth work that happens now is done by the voluntary sector. There isn't a city council run youth service anymore. I'll give you an example. Manchester City Council pre-2008 used to spend £7 million a year on youth provision. At the moment, it's about 1.3 million. And that's divvied up among probably 60, 70 projects around the city. And it doesn't go very far.
No.
That's just an example of how severely young people have been hit. I know it costs £200-300 to put a young person through custody. But for the same price as that, you could have a youth session running, or probably 2 youth sessions running. And so it feels like everything's been cut. If you actually put the money in the first place, you'd be saving yourself money. It costs a lot more to fix something when it's broken than it does to try and stop it breaking.
Crisis care is always much more expensive.
Yeah, I like that word. I might nick that.
Fair enough. And we are going into an election this year, so what preparation are you undertaking ahead of time to make sure that politicians continue to fight for young people and don't just campaign on big ticket items?
Youth organisations need to really find our voice in the next few months. I don't know whether there's like a collective campaign, any opportunities to promote the work that we do. From an organisational point of view, we normally do like a 3-year plan, but I feel like at the moment we probably just need to try and write a year's plan. 2 or 3 different scenarios of what might happen. In an election year, you're in limbo a little bit, aren't you? Because you don't know what's coming down the track. So I highlight the work we're doing, being quite vocal about it, and I guess jumping on any national campaigns.
Absolutely, engaging around manifestos. So what will you be pressing on the new government of whatever colour that they need to do when they take office?
Investment. I know that's a really easy one because money's very easy, isn't it? Just chuck pots of cash at something and it'll solve all the problems. But I do think it's been slashed to the absolute bone. I saw a statistic the other day for how much had been cut from youth provision, and it's in the billions. If young people have got somewhere to go, someone to talk to, somewhere to be safe and that kind of stuff, it prevents a lot of other issues and helps them to kind of progress into adulthood. Inspiring youth work by inspire the people to want to go on and do it themselves as well, doesn't it? If there's the right investment in it, the next generation then go on and say, oh, I've had that help, so I want to get involved in it.
Indeed, it is basically about creating a narrative, isn't it? So what do you think the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
If we don't start to really invest in young people again, they'll be lost forever. We need to start thinking a lot more about how we empower young people to influence their decisions. It feels like a lot of decisions for young people are very top down. So it's almost like you're told you must do this. And I don't feel like there's enough listening to young people.
And do you feel positive about the future?
I do and I don't. The elections, depending on what happens, is a chance for something new to happen. But then I also feel quite cynical about politics at the moment. I'm not entirely sure that the new government is necessarily going to change things in a way that's going to affect people that I work with. Just wonder what their priorities will be.
Well, it's down to us to make sure that they understand just how much those young people can actually add to the picture. So regarding your work, where can people go to learn more about you?
I've got a website, www.n-gage.org.uk, and I'm on social media. So if you just search N-Gage, I think it's N-Gage01 on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. You can find us on there. Google my name, it comes up with quite a few articles and things that I've written, and there's a blog as well. I've checked, so I don't think there's anything I don't want people to feel there.
I'm sure there won't be. And on that note, we've reached the end of another podcast. So thank you, Christie, for sharing your journey and how we can ensure that all young people have the opportunity to thrive. And thank you to the listeners who've hopefully enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed making it. If you have any questions regarding the podcast, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Have a good week, one and all.